How's this new OBS update?
You versus the mix she tells you not to worry about. Mix shaming isn't cool, but let's face it, the thief of joy is comparison. As producers, we're always analyzing the music around us, whether we realize it or not. And as engineers, we're always trying to chase what feels unattainable, what feels like magic, the unknown. At the beginning of my production journey, I remember feeling embarrassed to even show people my music, let alone play it at a DJ set. I was like, what the heck, dude? My shit doesn't sound anything like the people I look up to. What was I missing? What was I doing wrong? Since then, I've made engineering kind of a special interest. I've spent way too much time, way too much money, bought way too many plugins. And at the end of the day, what I realized, it was not a product that I needed. It was a change of mindset. Like everybody, I feel, kept asking the wrong questions, like, is my master loud enough? But what I should have been asking the entire time was, is my mix at its maximum potential? Hi, my name's Ian Vieto. If you're confused or feel lost, don't worry. In this video, I'll show you exactly how you can make the most out of all the elements in your mix, and how to get them to work together, all the way from individual sounds to the entire master chain, and to make sure you get consistent results every time. Small disclaimer though, there'll probably be some topics in this video that I gloss over just in an effort to try and stay on topic. If there's anything that I mentioned that you don't understand or you have questions about, feel free to ask me in the comments or follow me on Patreon and you can hit up the super secret producer chat and ask there. Now that that's out of the way, the first thing I want to talk about are the tools we're going to be using for the job. We have saturation, clippers, limiters, EQs, and then finally compressors. Now, of course, there's no wrong way to do anything. There's not even one way to do anything. But for this application, we're going to be using these tools in a very specific way, essentially maximizing what they're best at to maximize the sounds in the mix. So before we get started, you might have missed my last video where I gave away basically the same Ableton template I'm using here. I actually included 3 free goodies that are going to be pretty good alternatives to a lot of the third-party stuff you're going to see me using here. If you're on a budget or just want to try them out, go ahead and grab it on my Patreon. It's a free download and the link's in the bio. All right, so this project is about 2 years old now, and I figured what better time to bring it back than to show you guys how to do what we're about to do to this poor thing. I'll just play a little bit so you can get a feel for the record, and then we'll go from there. So I think that, you know, this might sound good if I just threw a quick little master on it. The only thing I have right now is standard clip. That is fucking crucial in my opinion for the beginning of your track. That way you just kind of curving off those extra outlying peaks before you go into your saturation. So I got True Iron by Kazrog, and then P42 Climax by Pulsar Modular. I'm sorry, I'll put the right name on the screen. Then this is basically just my low end checker. If you don't have a sub, even if you do, it's a great little tool to just kind of isolate the bottom end. And then Gold Clip is my clipper that I will be using for the mastering portion of the video, but right now it's just acting as a safety and just an overall gain. So if we actually see what it's doing on the drop, we can hear part of the mix is being affected by hitting the little delta here. Some people might say it's a crutch. I'd say use the tools you have. So you can hear it's not aggressive whatsoever. Now if we check our metering, we can see how loud we are. That's not bad. I know some underground artists that, you know, once they hit that number, they're basically good to go. But that's not why we're here today, are we? When I mix my tracks, I like to start from the top down. So we'll start with the drums. Let's see what we got going on here. They sound pretty chunky, but they're not doing anything for me. Aside from just getting the vibe going, something I like to do is compress my drum bus, and parallel compress to be very specific. You'll notice it just kind of makes the drums come to life a little bit. So here's 2 variations of the same thing essentially. Here's a third-party plugin by AP Mastering called Curvature, and then here's the Ableton stock glue compressor, which is essentially modeling an SSL G-bus, I think, right? What you're gonna realize is that they're not doing very much, at least it doesn't seem that way, but everything I'm showing you here today is basically a little goes a long way. And if you're anything like me, when you first learn something new, you're like, holy shit, I gotta do the fucking most, and you just crank the shit out of things. You're gonna realize why that doesn't work very quickly if you do that. All right, let's take a listen to what we got before. Pay attention, especially the double click area. You can hear the compressor working after. Hear what it's doing to those hats. Now let's check out the glue compressor. Here's before again. After. Here's curvature. Here's glue compressor. So I personally favor curvature a little bit more. I was using glue compressor for a very long time. Curvature is just so versatile as a tool that honestly, it's just kind of like my de facto compressor aside from FabFilter stuff. They all do the same shit at the end of the day. Just pick something that you like and feels intuitive to you. Now that the drums as a whole are kind of sounding thick, let's move on to the kick drum. So not bad. Let's see what we're working with here. For my process, usually my step one is literally just start with a saturator. You can hear very quickly how out of hand this will get if you're not careful. So if you're not familiar with the goodies that I had mentioned earlier, this is the Headroom Saver 9000, and this is the stock saturator. Now, as you can see, I've made some modifications to basically only the drive and the output. The reason you do this is because you don't want to fool your ears into thinking that the louder sound is better, because guess what? Sometimes it isn't. We need to be sure that the changes we're making to our sounds are the changes that we want to hear. So let's see what just putting this on will do to the kick drum. I think that's kind of overcooking it. So let's back off on the drive here, and we're going to in turn increase the output. It's better, but it's getting a little knocky. So let's try and compensate with a little bit of EQ. Right, I think we found a happy medium now. I've made some very slight adjustments just to compensate for the extra harmonics that are being added by the saturator. As you can see, we are saving a little bit of headroom, but again, it's the little things. And you're gonna realize how quickly your mix will turn to shit if you push it too hard with your clipper. Your bottom end is the first thing to go, and your kick drum and your bass with those massive waveforms, literally physically huge, long waveforms, sometimes bigger than the rooms that we're mixing it, it's the first thing you're gonna notice. So anything is something. Now to really drive it home, let's add a clipper. My personal favorite, and the one that I would highly recommend that you grab, is a fantastic tool, and I use it basically in every single session, is K-clip. Now the only thing we're going to do with K-clip here is basically just bring it right to zero. Now we can turn on the delta to make sure that we're not pushing it too hard, but we basically want it to be right up against that fader's edge. So I went ahead and level matched the two. So with the utility on and the chain that we just made turned off, it should be about 0.01 of a dB off from each other. So that way we're not fooling ourselves. Perfect. Let's hear it in the mix. That kick is weighty and almost too much, but we'll leave it for now, and if we need to make adjustments, we'll come back later. But we know for a fact now that this sound is maximized. All right, let's do the tops next. I'm going straight for the clipper. Remember, the higher frequencies can take more of a beating in comparison to the low ones, so you can really juice the shit out of this. We have a general amount of clipping now applied to the top bus. Let's go down the chain, and we're going to make sure that everything is sounding as thick and chunky as we want it. Claps first. Oh, we have decimal mode on here. So this is technically like a saturator, but it's doing a little bit more than that. It has a bunch of filters and basically makes shit sound old and cool. So I wanted to give this track kind of like a 90s vibe, but not so overblown. So a little bit of downsampling and filters and I guess whatever other emulation they're doing in this thing to make it sound kind of cool. And this is just my parallel effects chain for the clap. And then there is essentially nothing after it. So let's see what we're working with here. We're going to put it before the effects chain because I don't want to saturate what it's going to be doing. I just want to saturate the core sound of the clap. So as you can hear, there are side effects to clipping too hard. We're really juicing the shit out of this clap right now. And you can almost hear it sounds like it's gaining sustain. Just like you would if you distort an electric guitar. Fuck this, I'm making a rack. They're linked. Let's add a utility at the end of this for some makeup gain. We don't want max to be fucking 35. 3 dB should be enough. There, that's better. Sounds good to me. See how much headroom we're saving doing that. Ooh, quite a lot, but I think it's still too much. Nice. All right, let's move on. Quick compulsive Control S. So these hats have nothing special going on. Let's see if we can get them to sit a little tighter. So I was thinking if I should put this before. If you don't know what hi-fal is, it's basically a high frequency limiter and just kind of eases off the top end so that you're not going to get ear fatigue at higher volumes like the club where this will probably hopefully be played. There's just a little before and after so you can hear what this is doing. It's like a better soothe, like a very specific soothe. You can use it as a de-esser. Oh, I'm a dummy. I literally just made the rack and I did not save it. You can find this rack on my Patreon. It'll basically just be an updated version of the free one I included in the template, except now we have extra controls. In case you didn't know that, if you hold control and drag, it'll just make a copy of whatever you're dragging. That way we don't murder the high-end transients too much. You can see hi-fal does seem to be happy. Kind of gets the hat sounding chunkier. And again, because they are higher frequency than the clap, we can probably go ape shit on this. You know what? I kind of just want to do it for fun. Let's see what happens. We'll duplicate this, make a copy of it, turn that one off. They don't care. If you notice though, the transients are starting to get buried and we're gaining more sustain. Essentially, it's compressing the sound. Now, if you wanted to get sweaty, you could put a transient shaper on this. Nope. I like that better. Bye-bye. So next up, we have these fun little aux loops here. Basically just groove elements that add to the drum loop as the arrangement progresses. The base layer of excitement, in my opinion, I do like it. So I am going to leave those alone because I feel as if there isn't really a purpose. They're kind of just in the background. It doesn't really matter. As long as I think that it feels right, you know, there's not really any offending transient information that I can hear. So we'll leave them alone for now. Alrighty, next up we're going to address the bass. So let's check out basically only the kick and bass because that's all I care about is the relationship between them when I'm doing this. So that kick is meaty now, and it feels almost like the balance of the kick and the bass is wrong. So we should do something about that. I did prepare this session a little bit for the purpose of this video. Typically, I will have a saturator on my bass 99.9% of the time. And normally, you know, while we would try to not fool our ears, that whole thing, I want the most out of my bass. I will mix my bass to fader and is essentially trying to get the peak level of the bass to be as close to the fader level as possible. Where's that guy? And we're right at it. Cool. And now we can go ahead and apply a limiter right at the end of this EQ. And that's basically just going to keep everything nice and tidy for us. Doesn't need anything crazy, just enough to keep it tidy. We're gonna lower the attack there. We don't want it clipping so much as we do want it limiting. A little bit won't hurt. You can lower that release a smidge. Nice and transparent, just the way I like it. All right, let's see what it sounds like in the mix. Check on the bottom end, checker 9000. So a little rule of thumb for me is when I'm mixing kick and bass, I like my kick drum to poke out ever so slightly above the bass. That way, in the club, you kind of have that thumping in your chest. It's not something you hear, it's felt. Let's check that out. Yep, Yep, didn't need much. I think that sounds good. The last thing I want to do is maybe try another method of sidechain compression. Just that way they lock in super tight. Going to use this plugin called Laser. And this thing can split your signal into 3 bands and you can choose where they are. Oh wait, no, I don't want the sidechain. I actually want the kick because this matters. Check it. Unlink these because I don't want my mid-range to be so ducked. Right there. Laser does afford you a little bit more wiggle room, so now we can bring the level of this further out to get more of that mid-range from the bass. Don't have to worry about phasing issues or the kick drum getting sloppy against the pitch changes of the fundamental of the bass. That's mathematically clean, but I still think I want to use the compressor just to give it some of that bounce like you'd expect. So I do have this one on the sidechain channel. Yeah, has a nice pumping effect to it now. Let's hear with the whole mix. I think I'm going to do a little bit of an EQ here. So the only thing I'm hearing is just a little bit too much fuzzy mid-range, low mids. So just basically added a little EQ before the limiter to compensate for that. Cleans it up nicely. Next up, it's the leads. Pumping pianos, very cool. And then an organ to layer. See what they sound like individually. Together they kind of complement each other nicely. Sounds very full in my opinion. Let's see what we got going on here. Oh no. All right, let's break this down. I'm pretty sure this piano needed a lot of stylizing. I'm going to turn off the second rack here, which is my multi-band compression, and then some Pro Qs, and then some correction. So this is what the piano sounds like with mostly nothing. Sounds like a piano. Let's turn on this first rack here. Now if we turn on the fat rack, oh no, it still sounds thin. Magically, when you bring in the organ, now it makes sense. And realistically, all these frequencies down here are problematic to the mix because they'd be masked anyways by the bass, which we just thicken the shit out of. Let's see what we can get away with here for the piano. I have a feeling not much considering that I'm already doing so much processing down the line, but we'll start with the saturator just to see. I already forgot what the fuck I call this rack. Thick. Yes, very easy to remember. Good job, Ian. Mistake detected. Oh no. All right, cool. See if I sidechain this guy to the organ. That way it has a precise attack for the transient shaper and it's not just guessing. We'll do pre-effects. Yeah, sounds good to me. Now, just like I corrected the sustain on those other things, I'm gonna kind of do the same here with the bass. Backtrack a little bit because I'm noticing it's a little too long and that doesn't really translate well in the club. Just come in here and modify the patch and add some decay. Feels a lot more natural to my ear, and we can kind of confirm that as well on the limiter. what's in now. These other background elements I'm probably not going to touch for the same reason I didn't touch the aux hats. I'm really only going to focus on the things that are going to smack the shit out of the mastering chain. Speaking of which, you're going to realize if you downloaded the template that I gave away that I have a utility at the beginning of my chain. What I didn't include, because it's a third-party plugin, is standard clip. In an effort to essentially capture any miscellaneous peaks that we might have missed that the clippers didn't catch, I'll put standard clip in the beginning of my chain in an effort to catch all those stray peaks. Let's go to the last drop here. You don't want that doing too much. You're gonna notice I use a lot of utility in my chains as just gain control, because the reality situation is Ableton, like many other DAWs, modern DAWs I should say, operate in 32-bit float. And what that means is that it preserves information above 0 dB, and what that also means is that the noise floor is ridiculously quiet. So we can use that to our advantage to control the amount of headroom we have coming from the mix into our chain. And the reason for that is because some plugins don't like receiving information above 0 dB FS. So we can use utility to our advantage to make sure the plugins are in their sweet spot. So the philosophy behind my mastering chain revolves around the idea that you have 3 sections. In this order, you have your saturation, then you have your EQ, and then you have your loudness section. Although this could be considered saturation, I'm not really using it for that. This is, in my opinion, where the saturation starts. You have True Iron by Kazrog, and then you have P42 Climax, which is another type of saturator. I tend to like the sound of Transformers, aka odd harmonic saturation. It's a little sweeter to my ear, and it doesn't seem to clutter the mix too much. You can get a lot of harmonic goodness out of them for very cheap. And when I say cheap, I'm talking about the downsides that they bring. There aren't very many, especially if you don't turn it up too hard. So I'll turn these off for now, and you can hear what it sounds like before and after. Typically, if you're auditioning something that you've never used for the first time, you would put a utility and you would compensate for the gain that's being applied by the plugins that you're adding to your signal flow. But because I use this on almost all of my masters, I already know what it's doing to the signal, and I want the signal to be louder at the back end of these plugins. Something else you should note is that we've been mixing into saturation the entire time. Everything you've heard has had these plugins enabled, and that's for a very specific reason. These will tell you if you're overdoing it. I want the benefits that these plugins bring to my session, so I'm just gonna mix them on anyways. Sounding good so far. Let's get the chain going. I wanna have some EQ. One of my favorites is this SPL EQ. This thing doesn't like to be clipped, so what I'll do is the utility trick, if you wanna call it that, and I'll basically just do -3 out the back and +3 out the end. And all we're doing is creating internal headroom for the plugin so that it lives in its happy place, its sweet spot. So for this EQ, a typical thing that I like to do is roll off some of the high end, and I'll do this a lot in the dance records that I work on because you just want to avoid that ear fatigue, and this thing is great at it. It's very transparent, and honestly, this has been a lifesaver for me in my ears. Sounds good to me. Now let's take a look at Gold Clip. We're hardly getting into it, and the mix sounds very intact to my ear. So what we'll do is, just to see exactly what this clipper is doing to our signal, I'll set up a little rack to compare the before and the after. That way you know what to listen for. How much are we pushing into this thing? 6. So we'll do -6 here. I can hear the top end starting to fall apart just a hair, so we're going to back it off. Do 5.5. Yep, sounding good to me now. So we can go ahead and turn off that compensation. Yeah, we're barely tickling this thing. It loves it. And what you'll notice too is I'm using the clipper as a part of this chain, essentially as a big volume knob. I want the mix to be at this level, and my target, because now the mix down is correct, we can actually reach whatever target we want. For this style of record, seeing the output tickle 6 is more than enough to reach our target. I typically will shoot for 6 on dance records like this. We can go more if we really want to push the shit out of the clipper or out of the mix. But as you can see, we took a more subtle approach today just to get our feet wet. So let's see what we can do now with the rest of our chain. So I use Pro L2 essentially to catch those extra peaks and to make the job easier of the limiter that I have immediately after it. As you can see, the gain reduction that's being applied is next to nothing, and we want to keep it that way. So in this second limiter, I love typically using transient mode on dance tracks. It really does do a great job of preserving those transients, and I will typically slow the default release down because I want this to be transparent. Now, in my opinion, dance music has the sound of the limiter baked into it. You'll see though that the amount of limiting that I'm applying is not very much, and that's because the majority of the volume is already coming from the clipper. So we'll just enable this real quick, and that basically allows us to increase the input gain but reduce the output to have a fair comparison. So I'm noticing the bottom end is starting to fall apart, and that's just because the bottom end was already heavy in this record. So what we're going to do is reduce the bottom end just a touch, and that should give us plenty more headroom to compensate. It still feels massive, and now the limiter's happy. That stereo independent slider really opens up the mix. I love just cranking it. It sounds great to my ear. I'll go ahead and turn this off because we want the volume that's going to come out of it. And now for the icing on the cake, the limiter that does the most but also the least. This limiter specifically is used for true peak. So this is essentially how I have it set up, and then it also takes care of my dither for me. So a small little note about true peak, and I heard this from engineers that have been doing this a lot longer than I have. You want to keep your true peak processing separate and at the end of your chain, because apparently you introduce more artifacts if you start pushing your limiter with true peak enabled. So that's why I have a second limiter at the end of my chain that only does true peak. It's hardly tickling anything at all, and I also give myself a little bit of extra headroom just to keep the mixer happy when you're DJing. Now we can see what we're doing after all of our enhancements. I'd say we reached our target with ease. The mix sounds clean, transparent, full, lush, whatever adjectives you want to use. I'm very happy with the result, and it is ready to go off to my beloved vocalist whenever she has the time to record vocals for us. I think the main takeaway from this video is that loudness is a process, and unfortunately this process is time consuming. You should realistically be doing this as you produce or as you're mixing, but obviously in a setting like this where I'm just sitting down to mix something I had already made a while ago, you still can go back and make improvements and enhancements to stuff. If you'd be interested in a video where I start a beat from scratch and show you how to pick sounds that actually work together, let me know in the comments. I'd be more than happy to show you how this workflow can be implemented. Let me know in the comments and I can show you how this workflow can be Let me know in the comments and I can show you how this workflow can be implemented into your production workflow. God. As always, I hope this information was able to help at least one person out there. And if you have any questions about anything I did, again, please let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to elaborate for you. That's all for now. Once again, my name is Ian Bieto, and remember, you have yet to make your best music.